Not to spoil my own video or anything, but no, Stranger Things did not make D&D cool. Hi, my name is Haley Whipjack. You can call me Haley, you can call me Whipjack, you can call me Haley Whipjack, you can call me whatever you want as long as you're cool about it. And today, we're going to talk about why exactly D&D is considered cool now. And of course, the eternal question, is it though? How did I get started on this topic? I'd love to tell you. So recently there was an article published by The Telegraph, which is a British conservative news outlet, edited by a man who said fake news is good because it makes people like newspapers more. That's a separate conversation. Anyway, there was an article published that got people arguing on Twitter. I know. People arguing on Twitter? Unheard of. Now, this article was titled, How Stranger Things Helped Dungeons & Dragons Become Cool. And D&D fans did not like that. I am one of the people who did not like that because I saw it as just a factually inaccurate statement. Side note, it seems like they changed the title of the article to How D&D Became Cool. That's very funny. Did they get bullied too hard on Twitter? Stick to your guns, guys. You're trying to make a point? Make a point. Anyway, I thought it was wrong. So I asked folks on Twitter, obviously, what the thing was that got them interested in D&D. Not what got them to start playing, because a lot of people are interested and have never played, right? But the thing that made it to them cool. I got hundreds of responses. Here's a fun fact with the internet is people love answering questions. If you've ever wondered how to get attention on any internet platform, ask a question, even a rhetorical one. You will be beating people away with sticks trying to stop them from answering it. And folks who are interested in D&D love talking about D&D. They love it. I'll be referencing the responses I got a lot this video because that's the whole point of the video, you understand. But I likely won't be citing direct responses because I didn't tell people that I'd be doing that when I posed the question and privacy, you know. So my issue with the article was that I didn't see it as an accurate assessment of what makes Dungeons & Dragons an appealing hobby. But a lot of people seem to have a different issue with it, which is that they seemed confused that people would say D&D was made cool, that it's cool now. What do you mean now? They would ask you. Hasn't it always been cool? No. I don't know where you've been if you think otherwise. And by cool, I don't mean no one liked it. I mean that D&D didn't have the kind of grasp on mainstream culture the way it does now. And that's not even calling D&D mainstream. I don't want to get into that debate. You can't make me. D&D is more prevalent now in the kind of cultural consciousness. More people know what it is. They know what it looks like. They know sort of the actual scope of it, you know? That hasn't always been the case. Now, more and more you have people who are interested in starting the game, in learning more about the game, where in the past, people were more interested in publicly never seeming like the type of person who would touch it. And why is that? And, of course, why is it different now? And I know, deep in my bones, that right now some of you are looking at your screen and you're thinking, of course it hasn't always been cool in society's mind. Haven't you heard of the satanic panic? Hi, I'm a child. I was born in 1999. I did not live through the rise of the satanic panic, and I'm not going to baby-splain it to you. Somebody who maybe did live through the rise of that set of ideals. I don't know you. I don't know your life. I'm not going to assume that I know more about this than you do. What I am going to do right now is point out that I have seen a lot of people on the internet who also weren't alive in the 1980s acting like the satanic panic was, in its entirety, about oppressing people who play Dungeons & Dragons. I implore you to actually look into the roots, the rise, and the ramifications of the satanic panic, how it was woven into ideas of stranger danger and indoctrination and individualism, how it affected immigrants and queer folk, the long-lasting ideas that stick around in conspiracy theory now, religious fundamentalism and the way that that affects a society on the whole. Basically, what I'm saying is not everything is about Dungeons & Dragons. It's just not. And the satanic panic is so far from the only reason that D&D hasn't been cool. D&D began as a very underground hobby with a lot of convoluted rules that took a long time to learn and a long time to play. And the people who knew the rules in the game well enough to teach it were often cold to, if not outright hostile to women and to people of color. Not all of them. But the stereotypes came from somewhere. You can find countless stories of people who were iced out of groups, just completely turned away, told to their faces that the game was not for them because of how they acted or what they looked like, how their age, any of that. There are so many stories everywhere of people who thought the game seemed interesting and were shut out of it. And because it's complicated and something you have to play in a group, they just never got to play. And that's the taste that was left in their mouth, and they didn't have anywhere else to turn. Like, are we surprised that something that was for decades completely gate-kept from most people was not allowed to expand into the cool part of the cultural zeitgeist? I'm not. Also, yes, many people thought playing D&D meant you actually worshipped the devil, and I'm sure that didn't help. Some people still think that now, which I don't fully understand, but that's okay. So no, D&D is not necessarily inherently cool, and it never has been. You can think it's cool. You probably do. If you clicked on this video, I think it's cool. I love it. We're talking about inherently, something that everyone can accept and look at, even if they don't know that much about it. They can point it and go, that's cool. So that is why today we are here to discuss why more and more people have been getting into the hobby to the point where it's now maybe possibly cool. And to do that, we have to talk about things that are cool, things that everyone can agree are cool. I don't think anyone would argue with any of my proposed topics here. All of the things that I'm talking about today are inherently very cool. And we're going to talk about why those things make D&D cool. Are you feeling like cool is not a real word anymore? Because I'm starting to get there, and we have just started. Here we go. Hear me out. I don't have an older brother, but it's a fact. A lot of people, when they're answering my Twitter prompt, talked a lot about family members who were older than them, who some way, somehow were already invested in the hobby. Your older brother in this scenario could be a parent, an uncle, a family friend, a babysitter you were in love with, any of those things. I'm going to say older brother to cover all of these people, right? Someone older than you that you looked up to as a kid, who sometimes played a game where they killed dragons around a table, okay? That's your older brother. Maybe they didn't even let you play. A lot of these stories were about how cool the game looked when they were a kid, and they were told they couldn't play. But then they went and checked the books out from a library and learned it in secret. Because just knowing that your older brother plays, that your older brother and his friends were warriors and wizards, doesn't that make you want to keep asking to play? Doesn't that make you also want to be a knight warlock so bad? You don't even know what the words mean. You just want in. So you steal his books, or you go borrow books from the library because they've got him there. You teach yourself if he won't teach you. Stupid older brother anyway. Who needs him, right? Because you love your older brother. You want to be your older brother, and you want your older brother to want you to be him. You want him to see you as cool enough to take on the mantle. Because that's your older brother. Why would you not want to be a part of what he's doing? Why would you not want to be accepted into that subculture and community that he seems to be creating in your basement? Can you do that? On the flip side of that, many of these older brothers I was told about on Twitter were wonderful teachers. They were authors of whole new worlds. They were people who really encouraged young minds to pretend to be wizards and throw dice around and calculate Thaco? Whatever that means. Congrats to those of you who tried to tell me about that. Or sorry that happened. Whichever. What I'm trying to say is, yes, older brothers are inherently cool. Whoever your older brother was in this scenario, they're cool as hell. Of course, them being into D&D made you want to be into D&D. Older brothers like D&D. That's what movies taught me. Like the cool older brothers who smoke and listen to rock music and drive you to school and make sure you're always on time, but they will complain about it. Those guys like D&D. I don't know if your proverbial older brother was like that. Probably not. Like I said, I don't have an older brother. So I just have the romanticized movie version. Okay, that's all I know. I have a younger brother, though. That guy rules. The other thing about those typical tropey older brothers is that objectively, those guys are not actually cool. But that's okay. Because Hear me out. Who was your favorite cartoon character as a kid? Were they lame as hell? I know they were. Mine was Danny Phantom. Cool dude. Great guy. He was lame as hell. Beast Boy? I loved that guy. I still love that guy. My favorite guy. Lame as hell. I forgot he's on my jacket. I'm sorry, buddy. You knew it, though. Almost every show or movie has an outcast character, a nerd, some other trope or character inhabited and loved by people who feel like they don't fit in their own daily life. They're funny. They're sweet. They're smart, but bad at social cues. My God. They're just like you. And what do those guys do on TV? They play Dungeons and Dragons. There are so many TV shows that have single episodes about Dungeons and Dragons. This is such a weird phenomena. I don't understand it. Gravity Falls, Community, and Recess are all ones that come to mind about having just weird, like, D&D specific episodes for no reason. And then there's shows that talk about D&D on a more consistent basis. The two main ones in my head right now are Stranger Things and the Big Bang Theory, which loved to talk about D&D. The thing about D&D episodes, and also with shows who talk about D&D more often, is they almost always made D&D seem not cool or fun. Like, they really ham up how many rules and made up words there are and do whatever they can to make D&D seem absolutely impenetrable. And like the characters who love Dungeons and Dragons in these shows love it so genuinely. They love it with their whole chest, their whole heart. They want to get everyone into it. But those are not the characters that the scenes and the writers want you to agree with. They want you to look at those guys and think, wow, that man is not cool. Even Stranger Things. Before season 4, D&D and Stranger Things was not cool. It was lame. It was Will Byers in his little wizard hat trying to convince all of his friends to play with him, even though they don't deserve him. He put in so much work. For what? For who? They all like made fun of him and didn't want to play. They blew him off and wanted to go talk about girls. Your friend's been through a lot, please. Fully, it was portrayed as a lame little kid hobby. But now that they made a hot metalhead like D&D in season 4, they've made it cool. That's nothing. They really went off with the t-shirts, though. I think all D&D groups should have matching t-shirts. That's a new hill I learned I can die on. But the other thing is I feel like the fan favorite characters are the lame-ass weirdos who play D&D. They just are. They're the best ones. They're the best characters. People who aren't cool are inherently cool. That's a fact. You can fight me on that one. I want you to. Come here. And for a lot of people, their very first exposure to what D&D was how it was portrayed on a TV show, where almost certainly some lame-ass idiot was trying to convince his friends to play a game with math rocks, and everybody looked at him like he was crazy. I firmly believe that showing lame-ass cartoon characters like D&D with their whole chest really helped divide up who thought the idea of make-believe wizard battles with extra math sounded really fun, and who identified with the main characters of the scene, who knew better than to play pretend after they left elementary school. Because you don't want people to look at you like that, right? You see how everyone's looking at him. You don't want to be like that guy. Wrong. You want to be the type of person that people cannot help but perceive. And that is why. Hear me out. Embrace the cringe. Who has more passion in their bones than theater kids? That's right. No one. That's cool. I'm making separate points here. I'm not just here to defend the concept of being a theater kid. What I do want to mention is She Kills Monsters, which got brought up way more than I expected in the Twitter responses. What is She Kills Monsters? Well, I'd love to tell you. I knew it when I was in high school as a short play that was so popular that the people who did one act in theater every year made jokes about how many other schools performed it. People loved this thing. everybody put on She Kills Monsters. She Kills Monsters is a play that came out in 2011 about a woman named Agnes who uses Dungeons and Dragons to feel closer to her sister after a tragic car accident in which that sister and the rest of her family die. It's a story about self-discovery, queer identities, and also Dungeons and Dragons. She Kills Monsters played and possibly even premiered in an off-Broadway theater. It did quite well. There's also a Young Adventurers edition that takes out all the bad words and makes some of the characters more relatable to younger audiences. I feel like that's the version my friends had to watch 5 times a year, but I don't want to bother them to ask. So we'll just assume. I feel like I shouldn't have been so surprised that this was so many people's first exposure to D&D, but I was anyway. And honestly, what a cool first exposure. I think this would make D&D seem cool, seem deep, seem nuanced. And that's because theater kids are cool. Am I saying that because I'm at least theater kid adjacent? Next question. You know who else I'm lumping in with theater kids right now in this category? Online role players. And probably not in the way you're thinking of. These days, a lot of people use things like Zoom or Discord to play D&D, and they get their role-playing, their imagination games done that way. Before that was a big trend, people were still role-playing on the internet, in chat rooms, in forums, in Discord servers as well, making up characters and finding partners to tell stories with over text. But like, tell me that's not theater kid energy, right? To stay up until 2 a.m. just writing angsty little paragraphs to somebody you've never met in real life, hoping to make them cry. So they'll write you angsty little paragraphs that'll make you cry. Oh, I love it. And I got plenty of people telling me that they transitioned this form of roleplay into another, which is how they got to D&D. They realized that they could do the same thing, but with more people, with a little more structure, and in big, exciting worlds. And that's what they did. I don't blame them. Also, LARP. More than one person started with LARP. Feels backwards. If that's you, if you did LARP before you started D&D, I'm obsessed with you, actually. I want to study you. LARP is, of course, live action role play, LARP. It is physically dressing up as a character and acting out their life. People do this at Renaissance fairs, but they also do this just for fun. There's LARP guilds, that can't be the right word, communities all over who just meet up to play out these fictional lives. And you're probably not surprised to hear there's a large crossover between people who enjoy doing that and people who enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons. Most people start with D&D and then fall so deep in the rabbit hole they start wearing armor and swinging swords around. That's not the case for everybody, though. Some people do it backwards, I guess. And I truly can't think of anything that's more theater kid energy than LARPing. I just can't. Even like musicals, I think, are lower down the scale. People who LARP are so much braver than I. I would love LARP. I know I would. I can't do it because I'm a coward. I'm worse than a coward. I am a podcast host. Now hear me out. Hear me out. We've talked a lot about ways that people get exposure to Dungeons and Dragons. Okay? We've family members, TV shows, theater adjacent activities. We have to talk about actual play podcasts. So many of the responses that I got on twitter.com mentioned one actual play podcast or another. What's an actual play podcast? An excellent question. An actual play podcast, an AP podcast, is what it sounds like. People are actually playing a TTRPG of some kind, usually Dungeons and Dragons, but there's all sorts. So many people got introduced to D&D by the Adventure Zone or Critical Role. Obviously, there's more podcasts than that, but you would not believe the numbers. Particularly, actual play podcasts were very important for people who started the hobby after 2014. 2014 is a very important year for Dungeons & Dragons because 5th edition came out July of 2014, about 8 years ago. Dungeons & Dragons has a lot of editions. 5th edition is the most recent one. 4th edition came out about 5 years before that. 3.5 came out like 6 years before that. There was a 3rd. There was a 2nd. There was AD&D Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. We're not getting into it. 5th edition is the one that people are playing right now. Most people are playing right now. Some people still play 3.5 or 4 or 2, and that's fine. Most people are playing the new one, which is 5th edition. Don't yell at me. 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons dropped in July of 2014. The Adventure Zone started in August of 2014. So literally some of the first possible exposure to this brand new system was created by very funny men, professional comedians, with a pre-existing audience who loved them. Yeah, it got a couple of people familiar with the hobby. Critical Role started in 2015. It started after the Adventure Zone, which I think surprises a lot of people, but it did. It started in 2015. People in Critical Role ported their pre-existing Pathfinder game, which is another TTRPG option, into the brand new 5th edition of D&D. They had to make some weird changes and invent some new things to effectively do so, but that's what they did. And these people were professional voice actors, again, with pre-existing audiences. People already liked them. They were partnered with Geek and Sundry, another group that people already liked. So they were introducing what 5th edition D&D actually looked and played like to a huge group of people who would not have seen it otherwise. D&D is not traditionally, historically, a spectator sport. What the Adventure Zone and Critical Role and a million other actual play podcasts did was flip that. They weren't just players, they were performers. They were inviting you to watch what this kind of collaborative storytelling actually looked like. And these podcasts all came up with and rose with 5th edition. They were inspired by each other and they found more and more of a footing in the kind of broader narrative podcast world. AP podcasts are their own genre now, and they have reached so many people. And more than that, everybody wants a successful actual play podcast. Not just players and dungeon masters. It's not that everybody who plays D&D wants to be the next Matt Mercer and run their own show. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying pre-existing media companies want a successful actual play podcast. College Humor did that. That's Dimension 20, run by Brennan Lee Mulligan, one of the most famous dungeon masters in the world now. College Humor decided to get on the train, let Brennan run an AP. It went amazingly well. The Yogg's cast has their own. Rooster Teeth has done multiple at this point, I think. Everybody wants themselves an AP podcast. If you're already a media company, they seem easy to do. And in some ways they are. Yeah, but in some ways they are not. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of producing and marketing actual play podcasts right now. That's not what we're talking about. But what I'm saying is I think a lot of people see Dungeons & Dragons as a really easy and effective way to tell stories for an audience, which is true. Another wonderful thing that actual play podcasts did for D&D's publicity and marketing is genre shifts. All widespread displays of what D&D was like in media up to this point pretty much showed it as a high fantasy slog. If you didn't love high fantasy, if you'd never watched Lord of the Rings, if you didn't care about like kings and their armies, you would write off D&D when you saw it portrayed in like Community or Gravity Falls. But now, even just off like the top of my head, right? Fantasy High from Dimension 20, one of my favorite seasons of actual play there's ever been, is about as low fantasy as you can get. It's technically a fantasy setting, but it's inspired more from like 80s movies and nostalgia than it is Lord of the Rings, Brandon Sanderson, any of that. George R.R. Martin, that's who I meant to say. Christ. There's a Spelljammer resurgence about to happen with a new supplement for 5th edition. It's an old module from, I want to say, 2nd edition of D&D. Didn't look it up. Don't yell at me. About space pirates. People want space pirates so bad they've been begging for Spelljammer for years. They don't just want the same high fantasy that they've had the whole time. People are really playing with genre in D&D in these actual play podcasts and kind of the boundaries of the system. A lot of people would argue that people are using D&D who shouldn't be using D&D because there's a million other systems. I'm not getting into that right now. We're talking about why podcast hosts are inherently cool. And it's because they're playing with genre and introducing people to new ways to play a game that they may have initially written off as not for them. Okay? Okay. These shows are funny. They're emotionally moving. They are well produced. They're a very easy way to get a feel for the game that's being played while experiencing a good story and oftentimes supporting creators you already enjoy. You don't have to read all the books or rely on someone you don't know to teach you the rules. You can learn them by watching professional comedians play D&D and debate the rules at their own table. Plus, these shows depict a wide variety of people playing the game. It isn't all the prototypical D&D player. Summer of Abria changed the game. I love her. Not only are women being shown succeeding and thriving in the space, people of color are being shown succeeding and thriving in the space, they're also telling their own stories. And they're proving everyone wrong who thought D&D was only for the people who've been playing since the 80s, who could walk into a game store and buy a book without being questioned within an inch of their lives about what they thought they were doing there. Is there still work to be done as far as inclusion in the space? Yeah, obviously. But you cannot deny that seeing people who look like you, talk like you, joke like you and your friends has a real and tangible effect on your perception of your own ability to play the game and your own ability to introduce it to other people. Which reminds me. Hear me out. Obviously. Of the hundreds of people who answered me on Twitter when I asked what got them interested in playing Dungeons & Dragons, easily half talked about their friends asking them to join a game, or asking to teach them, or asking them to listen to a show that they really liked. If it wasn't a friend, it was their older brother offering to show them the ropes or having them sit in on a game. Dungeons & Dragons continues to be a convoluted game with a lot of rules that takes a long time to learn and a long time to play. You want to do that kind of thing with someone you care about if you can. People ask me all the time how to meet people to play with, and I've always struggled to answer them because I found people around me to kind of drag into the hole with me, and I'm grateful for it. If you don't already have those people, you can find them on the internet, or you got podcast hosts, you have TV shows, you have plays. There are ways to connect to the hobby, even when actually participating feels impossible. You can still be completely invested and entrenched in the world of Dungeons & Dragons and in TTRPGs in general without ever having rolled a single die. And you can use all those touch points to introduce people in your life to the idea of sitting around a table and pretending to be a wizard. And many people do, successfully, because if they've gone their entire life thinking that Dungeons & Dragons is not cool because every single depiction that they've seen of it has shown it as something that is for lame-ass cartoon characters and stoner older brothers, I don't blame them. I really don't. And you can use these touch points, the things you enjoy about it that got you interested in it, to show to other people. It's incredible that those exist. I could have also called this section people who care about things are inherently cool, because that's true. There is nothing that I think is more important for a human being than to find something to unapologetically care about. Dumb shit, even hills to die on. Things that you love and want to tell everyone about all the time. Do you know what older brothers and lame-ass cartoon character weirdos and theater kids and podcast hosts all have in common? The exact center of that Venn diagram is they care about things with their whole chest, and they want everyone else to know about it. And I could go on and on and on about how that's based in the inherent human need to tell stories with each other here. I'm not going to. I'm going to spare you that. What I will say is I think that's why D&D blew up a little bit more over quarantine in 2020, because we needed people telling stories, and we needed ways to connect with our own friends, family, communities. And it was a great time to learn those million rules and to watch those 500-hour long stories that maybe you didn't already have time for. It makes a lot of sense to me that more people found Dungeons & Dragons when they suddenly had all this free time. Here's the long and short of it. Dungeons & Dragons is not any cooler than it used to be. What it is more accessible. There are thousands of access points for people, from little glimpses to the aesthetics of popular worlds to long-form campaigns played by professionals and widely available to the public on free platforms. You don't have to beg your older brother to let you play. Brennan Lee Mulligan will play in front of you for free. I don't think a single thing or person or idea or show made D&D cool. I think a whole lot of people wanted to share their love for a thing as widely as they could, and they did it earnestly and honestly, and they did it well. The people who created these touch points care so much about Dungeons and Dragons that they do poke fun at it. And they do say that the lame-ass weirdos in cartoons play it, and they're right. They're right. Dipper Pines is exactly the type of man that would love Dungeons and Dragons. They kept pouring their interests into the types of characters they always align themselves with. I don't think that's weird. People write entire off-Broadway productions about how to use D&D to connect with family and people even when they're not around anymore. Your older brother wants you to play. He does. He wants you to play D&D with him. He just doesn't want everyone else to judge him for hanging out with his younger siblings. All right? He's sorry. And a bunch of people on the internet got together and decided to, every week, tell stories with their friends for anybody to see. Even if nobody watches, the amount of Twitch streams of people playing D&D with less than 5 viewers is crazy. People aren't doing it for the money. They're not doing it because they want to be the next Matt Mercer. They're doing it because they love telling stories with the people in their life. And they were affected by these media, by these touch points, and they want to maybe be that for somebody else. That's beautiful. And maybe for some people, their access point was Stranger Things. That is true for at least one person who answered me on Twitter. And that's okay. That's fine. People who get mad at Stranger Things for making D&D mainstream make my blood boil. I don't get it. Let people play the dragon game. I'm glad they liked the little gay boy in his wizard hat. I hope they get to play with someone as passionate as him someday. And I hope they love D&D. Because D&D is pretty cool. Thank you so much for coming on whatever this journey was with me. I've been Haley Whipjack, and it has been absolutely delightful to have you. If you would like to experience the actual play content that I produce, you certainly can. I'm the co-host of Unprepared Casters. We put out a new episode every Monday, anywhere you get your podcasts. It's short form arcs. We have a different cast, different premise, different characters every single time. I DM the odd numbered arcs, and my friend Gus DMs the even ones. I'm also a player on the podcast Misfits Adventure Guide, if you want to check that one out too. You can find me on Twitter at Whipped-Jack, WHIPPED Jack. I talk a lot about D&D and about the projects that I'm a part of, and also about the videos that I am making. You can also find me on TikTok, which is where I got my start in the online D&D community. I'm at Whipjack, WHIP Jack. And if you'd like to see me in person and you're going to be in Indianapolis the first weekend of August, I'm going to be at Gen Con playing on a couple of panels. I would love to see you there. Please? Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate the support on this channel. Hope to be coming at you with more content soon. I hope you have an excellent afternoon, evening, morning, night, whatever it is for you. I'll see you next time. Was the borderline Eddie Munson cosplay necessary for this video? No. Am I just excited that I put all my pins on a denim jacket I like better than my old one and I had to show it off immediately? Yes.